Hi everybody, meteorologist Joe Cioffi here. Thursday night, getting closer and closer to the Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. See a nice little crowds already gathered and then started having a conversation 20 minutes before the live cast. That's terrific. Hope everybody had a great day, and I hope you were all looking ahead to the weekend and to Christmas, and spending time enjoying yourselves and with your family. Extending wishes to you now in case you're not around over the next couple of days. Totally understandable. So let's move forward, because I have a lot to show you with regards to what's going to happen over the coming days. First thing I want to do is set up what's going on with respect to the current weather, because we do have some activity happening at the moment across parts of the upper Midwest. We've got some snows occurring in parts of eastern South Dakota, extending kind of a narrow ribbon into Minnesota and northwestern Iowa, across central Wisconsin into central Michigan. You can see the clouds with this streaming eastward. We're pretty dry here in the northeast down into the mid-Atlantic states, and there's warm air that's starting to move northeastward as a wave of low pressure is going to be coming out to the east. And this sets up the events going into the weekend, and of course for Christmas Eve and for Christmas Day. And with respect to the radar, I can show you that activity. It's nothing crazy at the moment, but you know, it's kind of this narrow ribbon of snow. We've got cold air bordered right along the northern areas of the Midwest, and there's that ribbon of snow that I'm talking about. Little band that's already moved into western New York. Some of this is aloft, and then it extends back right through Michigan, through central Wisconsin, southern Minnesota, maybe touching northwestern Iowa, and into parts of South Dakota and northwest Nebraska. You can see it right in here. So that's all, again, part of this warm front that's setting up in the eastern part of the United States, and we're going to take a look at how models handle all this. First off, with respect to tonight and tomorrow, I just want to show you with that warm air coming into the east and that cold high wedged down, there might be some spotty light precipitation, and the Weather Service, basically in my area, would be north and west of Route 84, where we're talking about accumulations of under an inch of snow and sleet. I don't know about the snow part, maybe even a little bit of freezing rain in there if precip comes in tomorrow while temperatures are still below freezing, because it is going to get pretty cold tonight, down in the low 20s, and in some places even near 20. So with that warm air coming up from the south, oftentimes in my neck of the woods, it makes it into New York City and central New Jersey, but has a real tough time getting into North Jersey, particularly northwest Jersey and up the Hudson Valley. So it's going to be pretty stubborn as it moves northward. So let's take you through how this is all going to go down, as the way I see it at least. And let's bring up the GFS. Move that to the top. Been doing a lot of rhyming. Those of you who are on my Facebook page, I've been basically doing every post with a rhyme, a Christmas-themed rhyme. So I've got that and singing on my mind. This is a happy time of year, so that's why I'm kind of big on the idea of enjoying yourselves. So just do the things that make you happy. Okay, so here we have it. Here's our GFS. So there's a little lead wave that comes out. There's a warm front that's going to be developing to our south. You see the model by tomorrow morning has that area of snow. It really sort of has it well north of me. I guess maybe the Weather Service is putting in the winter weather advisories down into the Hudson Valley and points northward. Points northward I get. The southern part is always a tough call. They have it up there. I think it's probably precautionary. In the meantime, during the day tomorrow, looks like some rain and maybe even a heavier band of rain through central Arkansas there. And I know there's a few of you folks from Arkansas are on tonight, and I want to acknowledge you with a big good evening. I know you need the rain, and actually you might do fairly well with this. If you watch here how the GFS develops this wave, kind of really takes its time with it as it moves out. Did I jump ahead? I'm sorry, that was my mistake. Let me go back again. Okay, so here we have it. There's the wave. You get some fairly decent rainfall out of this. Let's take a look. Total rain. Okay. Yeah, look at that. There's a nice little stretch there of 3 or 4 inches of rain being indicated. So if that convective area develops the way the GFS has it, you could do fairly well with this. And actually, the rainfall amounts are fairly impressive through Saturday afternoon in through parts of Tennessee and Kentucky. Here's the rain over me, which is basically on the order of a ½ inch to an inch, and some locally higher amounts start to show up in some areas as we go into Saturday evening before the front goes by. So let's go back to how this plays out at the surface again. And you can watch that moving along. By the way, meanwhile, there is a little bit of snow going on in the northern Rockies as a system drops down southward into southern Colorado, but doesn't look all like it's going to do very much. So here's the wave as it runs out to the northeast. There's actually 2 waves, one lead wave that comes through earlier, a second wave with the cold front, and on the northern and western edge of this, it does change over to snow before the precipitation ends. Now, the front's going to move offshore and stall out briefly. Another wave is going to develop on it, but the snow that you see that it develops here in the northeast Sunday night into Monday morning is more, it's being enhanced by an upper trough as it swings around. So the actual development of the wave is to me not really that important, being that it's as far out as it is. It's that upper trough that comes through and generates the snows, and it may be enough to produce a white Christmas in some areas. We have a map that indicates that. I'm taking a little bit of a shot here, okay? Sometimes I feel like I want, the situation can sometimes, I get the idea that it's okay to take a chance. So I'm going to take a chance here on what I'm thinking for accumulation amounts for my area. So, I mean, look, this is not going to be a big snowfall by any stretch of the imagination. So I'm thinking south of this red line. So if you were basically south of Route 195, just south of Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Baltimore, and points south and east, you're not going to see much of anything in your area other than a few stray flurries, if that. Now, north of that line up to just about to New York City and over Long Island, except for a little room on the North Shore, I went from maybe a coating to up to an inch or so in this area. And then north of there, and also from central Connecticut eastward into southeastern New England, I think there's a possibility going north of this light blue line. I think there'll be pockets of a couple of inches. Maybe most of the snowfall in this area will be in the 1 to 2 inch range, but there may be some pockets a little bit higher. And in from the eastern half of Connecticut and Massachusetts eastward, where you might catch a little bit more of the wave action offshore, there's a chance that you could wind up with several inches. So it's an early call for me here. Confidence level right now, admittedly, is a bit on the low side, but we'll see. I think there might be room for a little bit of upside if this upper trough swinging through is just a little bit deeper. Maybe it'll catch the wave a little sooner and you'll get a little bit more enhancement of the precipitation. Again, long shot view on this. All right, so let's go forward now after this gets out of the way. So most of the Northeast, some areas are going to have snow on the ground, and then you get this additional area of snow for Monday. So eastern New England may snow into the afternoon. Now, we are going to be cold next week, and high pressure is going to basically kind of canopy across the top here from southern Canada, north of the Dakotas, into the northeast. And there's going to be some energy that's going to be dropping down into the southwest, and some of that's going to try and come eastward. And you can see here, as this model run begins to develop some precipitation across the middle Mississippi Valley and on up northward toward Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and then of course eventually later next week, got a big high in eastern Canada wedging down the Appalachians. That's going to funnel down some very cold air, especially at low levels, and it's probably going to produce a fairly, let's call it a sizable snow event here if this works out. The GFS and the European have been showing this for the last 2 days. Now I want to go back though, because this particular run is a little different from the last run, and there's a couple of important differences going on in the upper air, which I want to show you. Okay, why won't it get me? I want to go to the earlier run here. There we go. So I'm going to start this back, starting from Sunday night. So see on this run, the wave interacts a bit more, by the way, in the northeast and gives a little bit more in the way of snow. The newest run, the in-between model run, which is not always reliable, kind of went a little flatter with this, but at the end of the day, it's the upper trough. And when we get the upper air, I'll show you that too. But here's the 12Z run from earlier, and you start to get low pressure developing. Now, you can already see from the prior run, everything is further south. And this was, when I saw this, I thought this made some sense. And I think what we're going to see here is back and forth. Yesterday, all of this was lined up much further to the north, closer to the Great Lakes. This one, with this big high that's sitting up north of Minnesota, starts to spread snow. And yeah, at least on this run, ice was indicated across much of the southern half of Arkansas, back over through Texas, and extending up into Tennessee. This would be a substantial icing event if it happens. Now, let me caution those of you who are watching, if you're here for the first time with a lot of these models, especially once we go past the 4th or 5th day, which is where we are here, we're at the end of next week, there's going to be a lot of run-to-run volatility. I think one of the things that may happen here is that this system, if it's going to air in any way, or be different in any way, it may wind up being a lot weaker and a lot less impressive than what's being indicated now. But out of this, the models did make a fairly substantial snow event for the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast for late next week and into next weekend as we head toward New Year's Eve. So we're going to be paying attention to this. And of course, the pattern remains fairly dynamic and active with some more weather systems around in the long range. I wouldn't specifically focus on anything in particular here, if only because of the fact that we know it's going to change. But the bottom line is, in my view, that we have a pretty active pattern. So why don't we look at the upper air so I can explain what's going on. First, we'll come back to the event for this weekend and the possibility of a white Christmas. So here we go as that deep trough begins to establish itself and swings around, and that brings the cold front through. And here's the trough now. You see how you get those darker blues that run from Minnesota down into Illinois. That is what is swinging around and lifting up in what we call a negative tilt, where the trough axis is actually tilted northwest to southeast. And oftentimes those kind of troughs can be rather energetic in terms of what they can produce. So I want to be a little cautious here. We are, still 96 hours away from Monday morning, and there's always the chance that this trough could be a little deeper. When I say deeper, I mean more intense, and maybe a shade further to the west, which might allow for a little bit more development here. Or on the other hand, it could be a little flatter and push everything out further to the east again. Now, over time, what happens is there's energy, and you see the lines that are coming in off from California. You see how they're kind of rippled in here. There's there are little short waves that are coming into the flow, and here's one as we head to Wednesday becomes very, very apparent down through Nevada down into Southern California. A piece of this is going to run eastward, and that's what brings up all that moisture that I showed you. You can see the trough there. Also, at the same time, the system in the east, part of it pulls out and part of it rotates back. So there's another trough that's swinging down and around coming into the northern plains. The position of that trough is going to be critical because if it's further west or further east, it'll determine where the primary surface low that's going to come out of the Gulf states, where it winds up. But in this particular instance, this is a very, very cold look of the model, and you can see how the trough here swings to the east coast, and this is where we saw the low. Here's the surface for that time frame, and we have an intensifying storm out in the coastal waters moving away to the northeast, and the substantial snows that are being indicated here. Again, this may change because when we looked at the in-between run, and I'll go back to that, this has a slightly different look. It's everything is further north, and now on this run, the area of ice is shifted up into southern Missouri and through south central Indiana and southern Illinois, southern Ohio, southwestern PA, because the surface low here, instead of running up toward the coast, and it's actually running up the Appalachians and on up into western Pennsylvania. This actually still does produce a substantial snow for a good chunk of the Ohio Valley. But in this case, it also pushes into into Michigan and Wisconsin, and also produces some substantial snow for perhaps northern areas of the Mid-Atlantic and on up through much of the Northeast, and then it just winds up changing to rain at the end. Behind it, very, very cold air comes in. Now the difference is that in this run of the models, the trough that we were talking about that comes in the west, you're going to see it here, is much further west, okay, than on the prior run. Here is the prior run position of the trough. You see how much further east it is? That is, that's a big difference. If the trough sets up further west, that lets the ridge come up more here in the east. So you wind up with a surface low that tracks up further west of the Appalachians. It still produced a substantial snowfall, but much less so. I'll give you the snow map here. Again, long range, just want to give you an idea of what's being generated. And I guess I'm going to have to use the total snowfall because the 24 hours the way it is not enough. Now, this is off the very latest run of the models, and you can see the snowfalls through the whole event are quite substantial. So we'll include New England in this when it's all said and done. And you have a large area of 1 foot plus snows being shown here. I'm not forecasting this. Let me make that clear. I'm just trying to illustrate what the model is doing and why it's doing it. But it does seem that we're going to have something important to look at for later next week. The European is a little flatter, a little further, further south and a little flatter, and that may account for the difference that it produces less snow amounts. Also, to tell you the truth, it does look a bit more reasonable. And that's going to lead me to something else. Now, this is why you don't look at, you take snow maps with a huge grain of salt. I'm going to go to the overnight run from last night, which I have to tell you was one of the most ridiculous model runs I think I've ever seen. Okay? And I want to make sure I got the right one. Was it this one? This was the overnight first run, okay? And let me put the surface map on. And there it is. So we'll go backwards. This, what you're looking at here on the surface, when I saw it, it really made no sense to me. This, basically what this is a 2,500 mile warm front running from Colorado to Providence, from Colorado to southern Delaware. It was beyond ridiculous. According to the model here, this model run, it snows. It would snow in my neck of the woods for almost 24 hours, and then change over to ice for about 8 to 12 hours after that, and then change over to rain beyond that. So that it just doesn't work that way. And on this run, notice there's a deep low sitting on the east shores of Lake Michigan, north of Grand Rapids. That is in marked contrast to this. Okay, so look at the difference with the same time frame. A deep low in Grand Rapids, deep low off the East Coast, and then the in-between run that we just looked at, the new model run, splits the difference. So it's all having to do with the position of that upper trough. That really is the bottom line. Does the trough wind up setting up near 95 west, or is it more like 90 or 85 west? If it's, you know, closer to 95, you'll have a look like this. If it's closer to 85, then you will have a look like this. And, well, I'm sorry, this was, I went one run too many. Then you'll have a look like this. And oh, come on, folks, help me. There we go. This is the midday run that we get. This is the one that has all the new data in it. The in-between run is just basically it's basically the recycled with very little new data in it. But this has a flatter look to it until the low gets offshore and then moves out to the northeast. So ultimately, it's going to depend on the position of that trough. Again, very interesting times ahead. And by the way, I'm going to go back. I want to go back to the 6Z run, the one that runs in the middle of the night, and show you the snow map with this, because this was just beyond. It was just so ridiculous. All right, which run am I looking at? I got to go back one. Where is that? There was one of these model runs was insane. Where is it? Hang on. I'm sorry, folks. Bear with me, will you? And it's not that one. It's kind of hard. That's the one. I finally got it. So let's go to the northeast. This is what this thing forecasted. Look at this. This is why you can't look at these snow maps with any kind of, you know, confidence at all. 55-inch snow amounts, 40, 37, 33, 44, 31. I mean, that's insane. Those are insane amounts. This greenish area here, this is basically 15 to 25 inches of snow. It's over encompassing a large area. You know, that was just, I looked at that and it just made me laugh, because it just didn't make any sense to have a warm front stretched out basically for 2,500 miles with bitter cold air spread out across 3/4 of southern Canada, and warm moist air coming up from the Gulf of Mexico back over through Texas, and causing all of this to happen. So the look of an unreasonable snow map, that's what that is. Now let's look at the upper pattern. And you know, if once this storm is done, by the way, the extent of snow cover is going to be pretty far to the south into the United States for the end of December. This is a pretty wintry looking map in terms of who gets additional snows, and it's all going to be in places where the snow, if we put down amounts like this, that snow is going to stay on the ground for quite a while. But upper air time, so we can look at the overall pattern. Excuse me. And we're going to bring our trough here in the east for Sunday night into Monday. You can see the upper high that builds up Alaska and northward and moves over into the Arctic regions there between Siberia and Greenland. It pins the vortex down in eastern Canada and over James Bay. You can see part of it pulls out. And then here's the new trough. And again, on this run, it's much further to the west than it was on the midday run. And I would, you know, I'm going to be suspicious of this because, well, I guess I could just say just because. No, I'm going to be suspicious of this because we know the model volatility that we've had, given the fact that the atmospheric pressure patterns that we've talked about, the Pacific North America Index, the Eastern Pacific Oscillation, all being, in extreme positions at one point or another through this whole model cycle, this forecast cycle, that it's going to send models for a spin. But the overall pattern, if you notice now that we're going into the 6th of January here on the long range, if we just talk about this in terms of the broad pattern, we still have this strong flow from the Arctic regions straight down into the United States and straight into the eastern part of the U.S. So we are in a very, very wintry pattern here that we're going to lock into once we get this cold front through here in the eastern part of the U.S. And this is going to affect probably everybody east of the Rockies over the next 2 weeks. There's going to be some pretty nasty cold. Somebody was really happy when I showed the 2-meter temperatures, so I'm going to do it again, and we'll put the U.S. up. Now this is on the last day. Look at the extent of temperatures running at -20 or lower. This is on Saturday, January 6th. This is bitter cold air. Bitter cold air in southeastern Canada with temperatures -25 to -35. The freezing line gets down into the Gulf states, teens, 20s, single digits. We can roll through this. I'll just start from Sunday. So now the cold air, the first shot of cold air kind of modifies a bit, although it does get cold into this week, obviously, and very cold up near the Canadian border, up through Minnesota and the Dakotas. But you'll notice the South is warming up here. You're seeing 70s and even some 80s in South Florida as we move through the middle of the week. So you're setting up that very, very tight temperature contrast as low pressure begins to develop. And there's that warm air trying to push up north of the Appalachians. And here in the east, you've got this cold air mass that's wedging down from Canada, and that cold air is going to hold on for dear life. My experience, by the way, in situations like this, when you do have highs like that up in eastern Canada that are that strong and that cold, is that cold air winds up being far more important, and especially at the bottom layers of the atmosphere. That's how you wind up getting ice storms. And look at how cold it gets, as we move into the first week of January. It gets bitter across the plains, the Midwest. You've got lows of 15, 16 below into Ohio, 13 below into western PA, 8 below into eastern PA. I mean, we could probably, I might be able to see below zero temperatures where I am, which, except for nights where I get radiational cooling, doesn't happen too often. Real quick, we're going to jump over to Europe and just to take a look at what's going on weather-wise for the holiday weekend. Don't want to leave you guys without showing you. Looks like weather conditions reasonably calm going into Christmas Eve. We start to get into some rain for parts of the UK for Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. It doesn't look like too much in the way of snow. A little bit appears as we move through the latter part of this week, but the models are not nearly as bullish as they were for snow in your neck of the woods a few days ago. Then more rain with a couple of storms coming out of the Atlantic. And then, of course, now at this point, we are in what I often refer to as squirrel land. And very quickly for southeastern Canada, for our friends in Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. Let's see what you get out of all of this. You've got a system pulling away at the moment. Here is the Sunday system. This is the wave that comes up Saturday night into Sunday. That goes west of Newfoundland, so you get mostly rain out of that. And then the Sunday night, Monday system brings some snows to Nova Scotia and Newfoundland as that goes by. That might become a nice tight little low. And then it stays quiet. A weak system on Thursday brings some snow. That moves out, and then it's quiet and cold. And of course, then at this point, it's going to depend on how this system for late next week for my neck of the woods, and actually for the much of the east and the Ohio Valley and Tennessee Valley. This is, if it's more of an offshore track like the prior run, you're going to wind up with some pretty decent snows out of this. In fact, let me just back up. I'll try to go back. Let me go back one run to see how the model handled it previously. Oh, it's going 618. That's why I was having trouble switching. All right, so I can just have to do it manually. And Here's the difference. Now, this is if it comes out like, it goes out to the south. You've got a pretty wrapped up animal that intensifies to a 940 pressure on this. Passes the heaviest snows, graze Nova Scotia in the dark blue, and goes slamming into Newfoundland as a 936 low. My goodness, that's incredible pressure on that. If that model run is correct, and that's, again, we're talking over 9 days away. I'm just illustrating here how the models, again, are different. I'm not forecasting this. We're not at the point in the forecast cycle here anywhere close to making any kind of prediction in the long range, other than to say that it's obvious that the pattern is very wintry, very dynamic, and a lot can happen. And by the way, don't rule out some surprises along the way too, because oftentimes in winter patterns like this, you get weird things to happen. Okay, and don't be shocked if wherever you are you see something, especially if you're in the Northeast, that you might see something a little strange and a forecast that goes a little haywire. And by the way, speaking of which, up into central and northern New England, with this system coming up, you may have some icing issues extending up into central and northern New England later tomorrow night. Nick Cortez, thanks for hitting Super Chat. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much for doing that. So let me just run through some of your questions. I'll give everybody a big collective hello rather than do it individually. I did see the conversation. Franklin Taylor, we were talking about Arkansas. One of these days I hope to get out to Arkansas to fish, to kayak, and then to and at least go to Oaklawn Park. I won't be anytime soon, but I'll put it on my list of places to go. Okay, I'm just trying to run through everybody's thoughts here. Let's see. Seth, you just saw me take care of next Friday because I knew it was going to be asked about. And let's see. Is there any David Allen? Nice to see you. Is there any indication that we could get some blocking over the North Pole to give some cold weather in Europe? It looks like, unfortunately, record warmth at the beginning of January. Does not look like blocking is coming back anytime soon like you had in the earlier first part of December. The North Atlantic Oscillation is forecast to be strongly positive for the next 2 weeks. So not that that can't change, it certainly can. But right now, it does not appear that there's going to be any kind of blocking that would benefit you in terms of wintertime weather. Much of the blocking in the upper atmosphere seems to be centered more west of Greenland towards Siberia, which is helping to channel a lot of the cold air from there southward from northern Canada into the Northeast. The upper air pattern, by the way, very much resembles the pattern we had for the winter of 2013-2014. When we looked at that upper air in terms of the structure of the jet stream, it matches up fairly well with so far with 2013 and 2014. GOFS Air. I agree with you with respect to when you look at these models when they're out in the long range. However, what I would just add to that is that it's one thing to forecast for a specific point based on what the model shows. That's silly to do. But what is not silly is what is the message that the models are giving you, which is the fact that the pattern is looking very wintry and very dynamic. And if you're a young forecaster, any of you young forecasters that are watching, up-and-coming meteorologists, recognize that fact. We all can see what's on the map, but you need to develop a skill that allows you to look at the upper air and understand what is actually happening in the atmosphere to cause what the model is picturing. And then you can take that and begin to, as you gain more and more experience, you begin to understand what the model is actually telling you, which may be a little bit different from what's on the screen in front of you. The more you do this, the more weather patterns you see and have experience with and see what the weather outcome is, the better understanding you'll have, and you'll find that you will not rely on models as much. You will rely on them to some degree, but your forecast instinct will take over. Tom Adams, thank you for asking. I guess you weren't around earlier this week. Kovu has crossed the Rainbow Bridge. He, I have spoken about the fact that he had diabetes, which was uncontrollable. He had two sugar crashes, diabetic related, and I was able to bring him back from both of them for a couple of weeks, and then for each time, and then he had another crash, except this time around his kidneys failed. So he was just too far gone. So thank you though for asking. GOFS Air, yes, 55 inches was ridiculous. That's a season's worth of snowfall in 1 36-hour period. Certainly, something like that rarely happens. Okay, so when you see something like that, where a model shows you something that rarely happens, 8, 7, 8, 9, even actually 4, 5, 6 days out and beyond is highly suspect. You start seeing stuff like that inside 72 hours, then that's maybe a different story. And even then, I would be a little bit, I would be very nervous about using that as any kind of definitive answer to what your forecast is. Hi to Earl Warren. Mirtha Gunter is here. We'll see how this all sets up in the long range, but bottom line is we have so much to look at. So first things first will be what's going on this weekend. We're going to see who winds up with a white Christmas and who doesn't. I've taken a shot today. Confidence level is low. We'll see if that picks up tomorrow. Maybe the models will surprise us and juice it up a little bit. But I don't think I don't think this is going to be anything major. And the other thing is, it's kind of timed out really nice that you could have snow where I am anyway. Sunday night, Christmas Eve starts up around or just before midnight. It's pretty much done with by 7 or 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock in the morning. It's just enough to put a nice mantle of white on the ground for those of us who want to see a white Christmas, but not too much that it gets in the way of your travel plans. Mirtha Gunter thinking they had a huge snowstorm, but what more to your area? 1940s. Well, we have an anniversary here coming up on December 26th. The anniversary, it's the 70th anniversary of the 1947 snowstorm that up until very recently, it's now the second highest 24-hour snow producer of 27 inches, which I think the blizzard of 16, the January blizzard of 16 set the new record in Central Park by 1/10 of an inch. But it's the 70th anniversary of the 47 storm, and the 47 storm is notable for the fact that it was a complete surprise. There was a time where they didn't really have weather models. Patricia Owens, prayers and light to you. Thank you, and prayers and light to you with regards to your daughter. Okay, so let's leave it there. Have a great rest of your evening. We will we'll be on tomorrow. I actually have the day, I'm taking some time off, so I might vary the live stream time a little bit tomorrow, but instead of doing it at 6 o'clock Eastern, I may push it back more toward 9 o'clock Eastern time. And we'll also be doing some on Saturday and on Sunday, although on Christmas Eve, if I do it, I will do it early in the day because I want to have a little bit of time off. And also on Monday, we'll come back late in the day. So this way, you folks can have some time off as well as me to enjoy your Christmas Eve and your Christmas Day. Facebook Live tonight, the Joe Cioffi, Joe Rayo show. That's going to be at at 9:15 Eastern Time on my Facebook page, Meteorologist Joe Cioffi. If you're new to my YouTube channel and you're watching right now, thank you for being here. Subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can get notifications when new live streams come on, which is usually once a day. And you know what? If that system pans out next week and really becomes an issue, we're probably going to be doing double streams through much of next week. All right, folks, have a great evening. We'll see you tomorrow.